Well, can you blame them? When your cities are built as grids with stop signs and red lights every few meters, it's just annoying to have a manual. Starts and stops are the only hard thing about driving stick, and US roads are just stop signs after stop signs. Here in Sweden, I used to do my daily commute without coming to a full stop a single time. When you have a 75 horsepower and a bad clutch, you kinda learn how to time your entry into roundabouts. But Americans don't have roundabouts. And even when they make it onto the highway, it's still just constant start and stop. So it's not that surprising that the first mass-produced automatic was made by GM. They had developed and perfected them during the Second World War, but they weren't efficient at all. Early designs like GM's Hydra-Matic, introduced in the 40s, sacrificed fuel economy for convenience. But in the US, this trade-off didn't matter as much. As one of the few countries that weren't turned to rubble during the 40s, they had a lot cheaper gas. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, European countries were dealing with higher fuel prices and tighter streets, making manuals the more practical choice for efficiency and control. Over time, automatics became the standard in the US, with manufacturers focusing on improving their reliability and affordability. By the 60s, most American cars offered automatics as the default option. Europe, however, didn't start to develop their own automatics until later, and by then, manuals were the norm. It was a hard sell when they were expensive, shifted slowly, and used more fuels. Europeans were already used to driving manuals. We had denser cities with less traffic, so it was never a problem. Even in the 2000s, manuals were just a lot cheaper, so people would still buy them. At the time, about 90% of all cars sold in Europe were manuals, while in the US it was only 20%. There's also a difference between how you get your driving license in the US. In most states, you can take your driver's test in an automatic, but still get a license to operate a manual. That's why you see videos like this of people thinking they can learn on the way home from the dealership.
What is this?
Spoilers, they won't. Your dad needs to scream at you at least 4 times before you get the hang of it. In Europe, you have the option to take your test in an automatic, but then you'll only be allowed to drive an automatic. So people took the manual license to be allowed to drive everything. People just bought manuals because they were cheaper. Same in the US, people bought automatics because they were cheaper over there. But manuals have started to get less common in Europe too. In 2023, only about 32% of new cars were manuals. However, it was only 1% in the US. And more people are opting to get an automatic license too. When I took my license, about half of my friends opted for automatic. Mostly because their family didn't own a manual car, so they couldn't practice with one. But it's just in the last few years that Europe has started using autos. Mostly because of the rise of hybrids and electric vehicles. And well, automatics have gotten really good in the last years. For daily driving, they don't consume much more fuel than your average driver would. And they shift fast nowadays. If you have a car from like 2005, it will probably feel kinda slow and non-reactive. Or maybe my dad's old X90 needs a transmission flush. Because in that, when you put your foot down, it takes a while for it to shift down, and then it revs up, but nothing really happens, it just makes a nice noise. It feels kind of like the clutch is slipping for a while before it starts to accelerate. But like a new DCT doesn't have these problems. And I get it, it's just nicer to daily and automatic. You can text and talk on phone easier, and you can drink while driving. No, I'm just kidding, don't do that. But like having a snack or drinking water is a lot easier when you don't need to shift. It's just a more comfortable drive. I know there are gonna be comments like automatics are boring or they have no soul. Yeah, most drivers don't give a shit about that. They only use their car to get to places, and they want the driving to be as easy as possible. Yes, for a weekend car I'd want a manual, but I wouldn't be bored driving a new 911 or a Lamborghini or a GTR. Most of my fanbase drives manuals, but people like us who like cars and driving for the sake of driving are a minority of drivers. Most people just drive for their daily commute. That's why 99% use automatics, and that's why Europe is closing in. If you want to chat about this, I live stream on Twitch. And if you found yourself watching a few of my videos, please consider subscribing.